Hey there, welcome to That Dang Dad. My name is Phil, and tonight I want to talk about disability, design, and why all of us, regardless of our body situation, benefit from thinking about accessibility. It's important for me to state up front I am not currently disabled. I'll explain why I say it that way in a little bit. However, part of my day job revolves around designing accessible websites and applications. In learning how to be a better designer, I've had to do lots of research on disability and accessibility, and I wanted to talk about why it's become important to me as a designer. I have several sources for this video, check those out in the description if you want to see where I'm coming from, but it is possible that I might accidentally say something a little off or stray a little too far outside my lane, so don't be afraid to let me know in the comments if I donk something up. Anyway, let's get to it. I want you to indulge me in an exercise. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to picture a disabled person. What do you see in your mind's eye? Do they look like this? Or this? Or maybe this? Many of us assume that disability is a visible affliction that obviously inhibits one or more body functions, but disability comes in many forms, and a disabled person might look like this, or this, or this. Chronic fatigue, traumatic brain injury, or dyscalculia are all disabilities that aren't immediately obvious the first time that you see a person, but they're just as significant as any other disability. This gets us to the heart of the matter, so indulge me one more time. Close your eyes and, in one sentence, define disability. What did you come up with? Was it something like this dictionary definition, a physical or mental condition that limits a person's movements, senses, or activities? Was it maybe something like this Wikipedia definition, a disability is any condition that makes it more difficult for a person to do certain activities or interact with the world around them? So this is what's known as the medical model of disability, basically the idea that disability is a condition, it's an ailment, it's a state of affairs that is located inside of an individual. It's probably the model that a lot of us grew up with. It's been the dominant model for decades. However, there are other models for talking about disability that put things in a much different light. In 1975, the disability activist group UPIAS declared the following: "In our view, it is society which disables physically impaired people. Disability is something imposed on top of our impairments by the way we are unnecessarily isolated and excluded from full participation in society." This is the social model of disability, meaning the idea that we should locate disability in the world around us, not the individual. In other words, people aren't disabled, their environments are. Now, this model doesn't mean that people shouldn't seek medical care, medical devices, therapies, or other interventions for disability. It just rejects the medical model's pernicious habit of treating disabled bodies as deficient and deviant rather than simply different. Given this, my favorite way to define disability is one that I think I stole from Holmes' book Mismatch, and it goes a little something like this. A disability is a mismatch between someone's environment and their intent. If you've never heard of this mismatch model before, I anticipate a couple different reactions. One of the common responses that I want to focus on is this. People say, it seems a little broad. Wouldn't that include everybody to some extent? Bingo! This definition matters because it completely flips the script on who is responsible for taking ownership of issues of access. Under the medical model, if you're disabled, that's a you problem. Me helping you out when I feel like it is charity. It's up to you to develop or acquire technologies that let you participate in society. Under the social model, if you're unable to enter a store, use a website, or read a tweet, that's our problem, and it's all of our responsibilities to address it. So why do I think that this is superior to the medical model? This is maybe the most important point that I want to get across in the whole video. So if you remember nothing else, I want you to remember this. And in fact, get a pen and write it down. Here it is. According to Robert McRuer, able-bodied status is always temporary, disability being the one identity category that all people will embody if they live long enough. All of us are either disabled or not yet disabled. Thus, building a more accessible, inclusive society is all of our responsibility because it is to all of our benefit. If you aren't convinced, let me show you how this applies to design. I first heard this concept during a digital marketing conference of all things. In a presentation on accessibility, Microsoft's Christy Olson explained that there are 3 kinds of disabilities: permanent, temporary, and situational. Permanent disabilities are the ones we always think of: someone paralyzed in a wheelchair, someone who's blind, someone with a chronic illness. Temporary disabilities are just what they sound like. Think of someone who broke their arm and has it in a cast, or someone who just had surgery and can't move around very easily while they heal. This is not to say that a temporary disability carries the same exact societal and emotional weight of a permanent one, only that disabilities can come in a variety of durations. For me, situational disabilities are where this gets really interesting. Imagine if you were a server in a very loud restaurant, or a new parent holding their baby, or a student who stayed up late all night studying and is now completely exhausted. While you might not be bodily disabled, the situation around you has temporarily made it hard to hear, reduced your mobility, or impaired your cognition. So when we design for accessibility, we design products and places and communities that the most number of people can use, regardless of whether they have some kind of physical or mental disability or just a situational issue that makes life harder than it needs to be. The most famous example of this is probably curb cuts, those sloped parts of sidewalks that dip down to meet crosswalks. In the 60s and 70s, disabled activists like the Rolling Quads of Berkeley fought hard to have curb cuts installed so that people in wheelchairs could actually get around town safely. But today, you and I probably take them for granted. They benefit more than just people with permanent disabilities. They benefit someone temporarily using crutches, parents pushing strollers, and travelers with wheeled luggage. Another classic example is closed captioning. It was originally invented with deaf and hard of hearing people in mind, but it benefits people watching sports in a loud bar, people watching YouTube videos late at night who don't want to wake up their partner, and so on and so on.
And so on, and so on, and so on.
For me, the social model of disability means no longer thinking of accessibility as something nice we do for the less fortunate. Accessibility is not a charity project. It's not a nice to have. It is a deliberate choice we make to include and welcome as many people as possible, because every human life deserves to be included, and we know one day we'll want to be included too, regardless of our body situation. So I suspect you're probably like me and that you hear all that first and you think, you know what, makes sense, I'm on board, accessibility for everyone. Unless you grew up in like ancient Sparta, you probably don't find it too controversial that a society designed around inclusion benefits everyone. And then along comes Stacy, Clifford, Simplican with this tiny little simple question. Does that include people with cognitive and intellectual disabilities? So you say, oh, of course, all are welcome, all are welcome. And Stacy says, cool. So they get to be included in democracy then. And you say, yeah, of course. And then she says, oh, really? Because my anxiety emerges from the discordance between the ways we as democratic citizens idealize cognitive capacity as a trusted democratic resource, and our realization of the profound vulnerabilities besetting our cognitive capabilities. Democracy entails that we imagine the most important political duties are cognitive tasks, such as reasoning, reflection, judgment, and deliberation. Allegiance to an ideal cognitive subject bases political membership on a threshold level of capacity and excludes anyone who falls below. Well, shit. Simplican makes a really interesting point. Think about how we in the United States have designed democracy and the ways in which we claim to protect it. We have elections where you go and vote for your representatives based on the written and video material that they produce, televised debates, analysis from political pundits. The First Amendment exists partly because we think free speech allows a marketplace of ideas to flourish. allowing citizens to reason through their beliefs and make informed choices about their representatives on ballot measures? What about people who have a disability that does not allow them to read articles or ingest debates or reason about which candidates would improve their lives? What about people who have a cognitive disability that will not even allow them to go and vote? Do they not get to be citizens? There's not an easy silver bullet for this one, and I don't want to stray too far outside of my focus. I only bring this up to show you that inclusion goes way beyond ramps and captions and braille. Inclusion is a mindset. It is an animating principle that requires us to start our projects by asking how we can make sure that everyone can participate, and by proactively finding barriers to access. As we can see in our democracy, the longer you wait to center accessibility in your projects, the more that lack of access will calcify. Simplican does present some ideas on how democracy can include people with cognitive disabilities, and they revolve around forging alliances of non-domination, particularly alliances that are public. Speaking about her experiences attending events put on by intellectually disabled self-advocates in public spaces, Simplican recalls how at first glance the meetings seemed chaotic, inefficient, prone to errors by speakers and then disruptions by the audience when those errors were corrected. However, she says, disability thus challenges the ways in which we think of the solitary orator delivering a speech to a passive audience. Instead, the speaker and the audience form an alliance in which both become active participants in crafting speech. Making mistakes in public and then disrupting activities to correct these mistakes is a vital component of practicing alliance. By negotiating power in public, activists resist camouflaging power imbalances between allies and self-advocates. In the closing of the book, she sums up how these public alliances are political acts. She says, "We act politically by sharing a meal when doing so makes others uncomfortable or challenges who is deemed fit for public space. We act politically when we throw our bodies in dance, when dominant norms insist that our bodies are best hidden or put out of their misery." So how does that relate to the rest of this video? Well, if these public alliances are one of the ways to ensure that people with cognitive disabilities get to participate in democracy, we damn well better be designing public spaces and events that allow people with these disabilities to participate and form alliances with us. If people with an intellectual disability cannot act politically in our spaces, that's an us problem. This next part is one I was torn on including because it's worthy of its own 2-hour video, and if you know my channel, you know I don't do anything over 30 minutes. That's the dang dad guarantee. That said, not talking about it would be avoiding a major systemic issue that affects accessible design, and if you know my channel, you know I'm all about critiquing systems. So let's talk about how the exploitation of disabled people is a feature of capitalism, not a bug. In her book, Capitalism and Disability, Marta Russell takes the view that disability is a socially constructed category derived from labor relations. As she explains, with the advent of capitalism, people were no longer tied to the land, but they were forced to find work that would pay a wage or starve. And as production became industrialized, people's bodies were increasingly valued for their ability to function like machines. Industrial capitalism thus created not only a class of proletarians, but also a new class of disabled who did not conform to the standard worker's body and whose labor power was effectively erased, excluded from paid work. As a result, disabled persons came to be regarded as a social problem, and a justification emerged for segregating them out of mainstream life. Under feudalism and before, many people were subsistence farmers, and disabled people in the community were allowed to contribute in whatever ways worked for them. There was no reason to prevent them from helping haul boxes, or feed the chickens, milk the cows, or just simply existing as a member of the family. That changed under capitalism because now profits come from the surplus value left over once you combine raw materials with labor. If a disabled worker requires too many costly accommodations, That surplus value is eroded, and capitalism demands that they be fired to preserve profits. Even if a company wanted to be nice about it, failure to maximize profits makes them less competitive in the free market and less valuable to shareholders. Under capitalism, that's a death sentence for a business. This is all the more outrageous when you learn that even when businesses do employ disabled people, legally they're allowed to pay them wages lower than our already abysmal minimum wage in many cases. Next time you see a company bragging about employing disabled workers for PR brownie points, it's pretty likely they're actually simply exploiting these workers for extremely cheap labor. Apart from all that, according to Russell, there's another reason capitalism preserves disability as a class. Being categorized as disabled and the subsequent impoverishment that so many face when struggling to survive on disability benefits serves another class function. It generates a very realistic fear among workers of becoming disabled. American business retains its power over the working class through a fear of destitution that would be weakened if the safety net were to actually become safe. Does that sound cynical to you? In the COVID pandemic of the early 2020s, politicians who are bought off by big business have refused to give Americans regular payments to stay home and control the spread of a killer virus because they say it will dissuade people from working. It doesn't matter that millions of jobs have vanished, millions are about to be homeless, hundreds of thousands are dead. Corporations and their lapdogs in Congress need you to either generate profits or die. And in the case of underpaid essential workers, it's both. The reason I bring this up tonight is because it's important for you to know that a lot of disabled people want to work and are being prevented from doing so. In 2000, when Marta was writing her essay, 79% of disabled working age adults said that they wanted to work, but only 27.6% of them were employed. So think back to Simplican's discussion of cognitively disabled people who want to participate in politics and consider this. Disabled people are disproportionately barred from working and disproportionately barred from participating in democracy. We make it hard for them to earn money, survive with dignity, or influence their leaders. If you were a space alien happening upon our planet and analyzing the design of the American system, what would you assume our end goal is for disabled people? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Of course not. I feel like this is important because it's not enough to remember to fix the color contrasts on our websites. It's not enough to remember to add closed captioning to videos. It's not enough to build ramps. It's not enough to put braille on ATMs. It's not enough to put in curb cuts. It's not enough for you or me to individually choose to build this or that thing accessibly. Those are all good things to do, but as long as we live in a world dominated by wealth hoarding and a profit motive, all of us are at risk of being deemed too expensive to accommodate, too much of a liability to live. So yes, we need to build more accessible products and spaces and events and communities, but we can't stop there. Returning to Simplican and her prescription for alliances, she says, disability studies scholar and activist Paul Longmore describes how disability offers a set of alternative values around alliance, inviting not independence but interdependence, not functional separateness but personal connection, not physical autonomy but human community. Practicing alliance allows disabled self-advocates and allies to navigate new pathways in political participation, resisting demands for compulsory capacity and paternalism. This is a reminder to people like me that I can't just sit in my office, read a couple of books about disability, slap some alt text on images, and call myself an ally. If I really believe that a better, more accessible world is possible, I have to enter into real, honest, messy, sincere relationships with people. I have to listen to them when they ask for help, lean on them for their contributions, amplify their needs, and fight alongside them against the forces that are stomping on all of us. We're not going to think our way into a more compassionate world. We're going to have to band together in solidarity and build it as a team. We succeed together or not at all. Robert McRuer blew my mind when he wrote that disability is the one identity category everyone will embody if they live long enough. In the same way, Mel Baggs blew my mind when they wrote that you can find a vein of ableism located inside every other form of oppression, from the way gay people were thought to have a psychiatric illness, to the way black people were thought to have lower IQs than white people, to the way poor people are threatened with the eugenics of social Darwinism. Baggs wasn't saying that ableism is the highest or worst or most important form of oppression, only that it seems to stick its nose into every other way that we decide who gets to be included and who must be excluded from society. If Baggs is correct that ableism can be located anywhere people are being oppressed, and if McRuer is correct that all of us will someday embody disability, then I'd say that's a pretty compelling argument that accessibility is something all of us need to champion, if not from altruism, at least from self-interest. In the conclusion of Crip theory, McRuer writes, whether it's the adage of everyone will be disabled if they live long enough, or Harriet McBride Johnson's report on the disability gulag, that terrible future space that an able-bodied culture has constructed where she, you, or I might end up, it's clear that we are inescapably haunted by the disability to come. And the disability to come, the one we invoke, has often been frightening, as is suggested not only by the way the able-bodied recoil, but also by Johnson's quite reasonable desire not to be lost forever in nursing homes or other institutions. There are other ways of summoning the future, however. Despite the fact that these frightening futures make it difficult to do so, what might it mean to welcome the disability to come, to desire it? What might it mean to shape worlds capable of welcoming the disability to come? Indulge me in one last exercise. Take a look at the world around you, your house, your family, your job, your recreation, your neighborhood, your city, your state, your country. What would have to be different for you to welcome your inevitable disability, or to cherish the one that you already have? What would you tweak, adjust, construct, or tear down to enable you to greet the future with confidence? Today, probably a lot, and it probably feels overwhelming to think about. But, as Marta Russell writes, the basic law of evolution is not about adaptation, it is about self-transcending creativity. Moving beyond adapt or perish, that is, beyond simply accepting one's environment as permanent, it is to move into a realm where one seeks to transform the inequalities. Our freedom lies in the fact that we are not at the mercy of some natural law. We are part of a social order which is by no means fixed, but needs democratizing to offer a counterforce to the dominant market society. So this is what I leave you with, a vision of what may soon come to pass, and the knowledge that you, me, and our friends and our neighbors can build a world that allows us to greet these inevitabilities with peace. A very small number of people stay very rich, keeping us apart, keeping us squabbling, keeping us dejected, keeping us hopeless. So let's come together and show them what else can be inevitable when the people unite. Anyway, thank you for spending time with me tonight. I'd love to hear what you all think in the comments, particularly if you're somebody for whom the environment is constantly disabled. If you were waving the magic wand of solidarity, what would you change? What would you adjust? Let us know in the comments. If you found this video interesting, please give it a like, and I'd really appreciate it if you would share it with people that you think would find it interesting or that you think would get something out of it. Remember, we're all in this together, so the more people who internalize this, the better. Anyway, thanks again for joining me, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Good night.